for the inconvenience. Welcome everyone to
Bye.
this interesting IMGA webinar. Today we have the pleasure to share with you the interesting webinar offered by Dr. Lola Pereira and Dr. Andrea Blois, Asbestos, the Silent Killer. Dr. Lola Pereira is a professor at the University of Salamanca. She graduated in geology by the University of Salamanca and has a master in sciences by the University of Portsmouth, UK. She spent 4 years working at the nuclear reactor of McMaster University in Canada, first as a postdoc and after as visiting researcher. She has been the chair of the IUGS Publications Committee, Secretary General of the Heritage Stones IUGS Subcommission, and now is Controller of the IUGS Executive Committee. She teaches geochemistry at the University of Salamanca and is leading European projects to incorporate research matters in the study programs of universities in Africa. Dr. Andrea Blois is an accomplished associate professor of mineralogy at the Department of Biology, Ecology, and Earth Sciences at Calabria University in Rendi, Italy. His research specializes in the hydrothermal synthesis and flux growth of minerals at elevated temperatures and pressures, focusing particularly on sheet silicates, asbestos minerals, and borate. He is the member of editorial boards of many scientific journals and guest editor for multiple special issues. He currently is the scientific director of the Laboratory of Experimental Mineralogy and X-ray and Raman Spectroscopy Laboratory at the university, where he oversees research activities and educational initiatives in mineralogical science. So welcome, both of you, and we are very grateful to have you here. Please start.
Welcome.
Yeah, thank you very much, Aurora. I'm very sorry for the problems we have. I don't understand what happened. Something was going on in parallel of this session, but I couldn't control it. So, well, good afternoon, or good morning, or good evening, depending on where you're connecting. Well, first of all, I want to tell you that we are recording this session, and it will be available at the site of the IMGA afterwards. Well, I'm Lola Pereira. I'm professor at the University of Salamanca, and together with Professor Andrea Bloise from the University of Calabria in Italy. You want to say hello, Andrea?
Hello.
There it is. We are going to talk today about the very interesting subject related to medical geology, but in science in general. This is about asbestos and asbestosis. We have organized this webinar in 3 parts. First, I will talk to you about the working areas where we have been doing our research and taking our samples for the experiments. Also, I will tell you about the rocks that host asbestos and why it's so important to characterize these rocks and the outcrops from where the rocks are extracted. The second part, Andrea, will focus on the mineral phases, the fibers, the characteristics, the different kind of asbestos minerals, and how these fibers can go into the lungs. And finally, I will give some advice on the prevention methods, that is, methods that are linked to any potential risk or hazard, natural or anthropic, that should be implemented to diminish the danger or finally to save lives. So, well, asbestos is hosted in the ultramafic rocks, mainly in serpentinites, and serpentinites are very important in different contexts. So there has been a lot of work going on serpentinites, and still is going on. For example, we are working with serpentinites, and this is the reason for which we should know about the danger that involves working with serpentinites. First of all, serpentinites have important geological value because they help to understand the evolution of ultramafic complexes that have been affected by fluids of all kinds, hydrothermal fluids, meteoric fluids, or even the seawater. Serpentinites are very interesting as well because they have commercial value. They are very valued ornamental stones because they are very pretty. So they have been sold, as I mentioned, stones and used in construction for centuries. And serpentinites are also important in the environmental context. They are natural analogs because serpentinites can take CO2, the carbonatized by the influence of fluids enriched in this CO2. These fluids help to convert the serpentine minerals into carbonates, and depending on the fluids, they can also be converted into talc. But when they get the CO2 is captured by the carbonates. So if this happens in nature, it can be provoked. The CO2 in the atmosphere can be injected in serpentinites, and it will stay there. So it will be a sort of CO2 entrapment, and this is a very important research area. It cannot be implemented in reality so far because it takes a lot of energy, and the infrastructure is very complicated, but I think we will see it sooner or later. We have working samples from Spain and from Italy. In this picture, we see the Cabo Ortegal complex in Galicia, in the northwestern part of the Iberia Peninsula, and we see that we have been doing some work in Italian samples as well. In Italy, we have ultramafic massives from north to south. We have this northern part of Italy with the serpentinites in the Piemonte region, and all the way down where Calabria is based. And in this Calabria region, we can find the serpentinites as well. So in this picture, we see an ultramafic igneous rock from Galicia, peridotites, dunites, and hartbrugites. Here, the rock is relatively fresh, but this rock is cut by many shears and veins, helping fluids to cut and weather the igneous rock to produce the serpentinite. The serpentinite is mainly made by serpentine minerals, the anticorite, lizardite, and chrysotyl, and with different textures. And it is the chrysotyl, the one that is going to be the target of the asbestos interest. Chrysotyl is mainly hosted in veins, although it can be part of the general mineralogy of the serpentinite. The serpentinite is easily transformed into different varieties like carbonates or talc, but when it's still a serpentinite, it shows a very pretty colors. Normally it is green, but it can go to kind of brownish as well. It has impressive textures that remind us of serpents, the animals, and that's why the name of serpentinite. When the serpentinite is polished, we see that it takes different colors and different textures, and all these shades makes them very valuable as ornamental stones. So we were saying that serpentinite is easily transformed into carbonates and talc, and this makes the rock very easily to carve. So we find artifacts and historic buildings made of serpentinites and transformed serpentinites that were built centuries ago, and in every country all around the world. This is an example of a very elaborate building in India. But we can find historic buildings using serpentinites in everywhere. For example, this is a cathedral in Genoa, the Cathedral of Genoa in Italy. We also have the cathedral in Florence, And all the green colors are given by the use of the serpentinite. But the serpentinite can be used as well for the contemporary architecture. Here you have some examples. This is the interior of a restaurant, a bathroom. Actually, it is not the best stone to use in a place like this, but it's the bathroom of a restaurant made with the serpentinite. And it's also used in exteriors, like in this shop in Vienna, in Austria, where they use the serpentinite to build the facade. We find some different sculptures and different artifacts made of serpentinite. This is a special issue of Elements where you can find information on the serpentinites, all about serpentinites, where there is some geology on the serpentinites from some specific places, the importance, the economic importance of the serpentinites, but it talks as well about the sculptures and the heritage related to the serpentinites, like this one here. This is a sculpture. It was done by the Canadian Inuits from the Arctic, and now it is in a museum, the Winnipeg Art Gallery in Canada. Also, you can use the serpentinite to build some domestic artifacts, like these ones you have here. And because the serpentinite can be transformed into other softer rocks like talc, we see that centuries ago the rock was used to build ornaments for the facades of some historic buildings. These are some churches in Galicia, in the north of Spain, where they used the serpentinite transformed into talc to build all these ornaments, like a coat of arms, and also some engravings, because it's so easy to carve. Because the serpentinite can be transformed into talc, this is an extra problem that serpentinites can give. We know that serpentinite is made of serpentine minerals, including some fibrous varieties, and because talc is produced through this reaction, serpentine plus CO2 to give talc plus the magnesium carbonate and water, of course, we're going to get a talcosite or a rock that is mostly talc, and this is extracted and is used for some industry. There was a problem in the United States of America some years ago because some users of talc powder, this very popular talc powder, claimed that they had developed cancer for the use of the baby powder. The baby powder was commercialized by this important company, Johnson & Johnson. Well, it's still a legal problem, and there is a lot of research going on because they didn't get to final conclusions on this subject. But the company had a serious economic problem because first they had to stop commercializing this baby powder, and they had to compensate some of the users. So for all these reasons, it's very, very important to apply science to characterize all the rocks, and we should know that some of these asbestos, some of these fibers are more dangerous than others. So now Andrea is going to focus on this characterization, and we will see that some of these fibers are more dangerous than others. Andrea.
Okay, thanks. Good morning, good afternoon. I continue the discussion of Professor Pereira about serpentinite and asbestos. But what is asbestos? Asbestos means inextinguishable for its excellent physical properties of asbestos, and is a term used to indicate 6 fibrous silicates belong to serpentine and amphibolous groups, and including the chrysotile, the only phyllosilicate, actinolite, crocidolite, tremolite, amosite, and anthophyllite. And all these 6 minerals are fibrous in morphology and have a different chemical composition. And the bundle of the fibers can splitting in a single fibers named fibrils that is very long and thin. Today is widely accepted by scientific community that exposure to asbestos bring and develop a negative health risk. The human health risks are based on the potential fibers inhalation when they become airborne. In fact, when the fibers reach the deep part of the lung, can trigger adverse effects such as mesothelioma and lung cancer, and in the upper larynx cancer. And it is worth to remember that today asbestos deaths are more than 100,000 in 1 year. The fibers mechanism causing disease are not yet completely understood, but several factors are invoked for asbestos toxicity. The main is the fiber size, because only breathable fibers are considered asbestos. That is, the fibers long measure of 5 microns, diameters minor of 3 microns, and length over diameters measure of 3. And the other factor is the biodurability of the fibers. In fact, the fibers remain stable inside the lung for many years. This is the resilience of the fibers. And in this perspective, the biodurability of asbestos amphibole are more than chrysotile. Another factor is the activity of the surface ion of asbestos minerals. It is worth to remember that this is not structural ion, but ion even in trace or as minor elements. That is leaching in the environmental of lung cause inflammatory process and then cancer. And the last factor is the potential toxic element contained in asbestos minerals. In fact, in the last years, many authors have claimed that these potential toxicogenic elements can increasing the toxicity of the asbestos. In fact, when the fibers is dissolved inside the lung, can release the these toxic elements and increasing the asbestos toxicity. This is an argument to increase the band or the universal band of asbestos mineral. This is a scheme of asbestos pathogenicity. What's happened when the fibers reach the deep part of the lung, named alveoli? In the case of short fibers, macrophages could be eaten the fibers, but in case of long fibers like this, the macrophages don't break the fibers, and this process called frustrated phagocytosis. This biochemical process provoke damage of the tissues and the initiation of the adverse effect leading to carcinogenic process that bring at cancer. This is because the macrophage, the persistent activation of the macrophage try to dissolve the fibers inside the lung, but this creates an inflammatory process. But where are the asbestos minerals? Asbestos minerals is content mainly in serpentinite and metabasite rocks. And the favorite environmental for asbestos growth is in the vein, because in this part of the rock, the asbestos can grow with a fibrous morphology, with a flexibility, have the space to grow with this morphology. It is worth remember that natural occurring asbestos is a term to describe rock and soil that contain fibrous minerals that meet or non meet with the regulatory definition of asbestos. Asbestos have been exploited for many years due to the excellent mechanical properties, economic and easy to work to make asbestos cement sheet, asbestos plaster, asbestos pipes, asbestos ropes, and other manufactures. And today, only 34% in the world, the use of the asbestos mineral is restricted or banned. And indeed, in the other state, asbestos is still exploited, processed, and sold. These are a political choice. And today we have a double problem. In one end, we have a natural occurring asbestos that is rock and soil contain asbestos or mineral fibers that can remove or disturb it to build a road or tunnel and can release fibers in air and increasing the environmental pollution. And on the other hand, we have a product containing asbestos that is still spread over a territory and can break this manufacture that release fibers of asbestos, increasing the environmental pollution. This is an example of a quarry in South Italy, where for many years have exploited serpentinite rock and processed to make the road floor, flooring, floors, door frame. And this manufacture today is spread over territory. And if this manufacture is break, could be released fibers in the air. Dangers for the people. This is another example of NEO. In this slide, we can see a soil that come from serpentinite rocks and contain asbestos fibers. And in this case, when this soil are dug, can release in the air fibers of asbestos. In fact, many authors suggest to wet it before dug it. This is another example of a village built over a serpentinite rock in South Italy. We can see a flat near a serpentinite rocks that in particular contain asbestos mineral, chrysotile and tremolite. And we can see a conoid made of dust come from the erosion of the serpentinite rock. And we can see the track on my shoe over this conoid, and in a windy day, this dust can release in the air and increasing the environmental pollution of the village, and the water can move this dust around the village, increasing the environmental pollution. And people in this territory should be careful. How was is asbestos study? Mainly in 3 steps. The first step is the preliminary geological study. The second step is sampling activity of rock, soil, air, and water. And the third step is mineralogical and geochemical characterization by SEM, TM, thermanalysis, and other analysis. This is an example of sampling a rock and soil, even in South Italy, of rock and soil. And This is a typical dust storm around Las Vegas that contain tremolite asbestos. In fact, many authors suggest alternative sampling activity while cycling or while playing football. The people wear a mask that have a filter that collect air and eventually asbestos fibers. To talk about asbestos, there is another project that we are getting to work in this data. It's deal with the identification of the asbestos fibers in the water, both spring and surface water, close to natural occurring asbestos to make a map of environmental pollution. It is worth remember that today don't have evidence of stomach cancer due to the asbestos drink, but this is a secondary environmental pollution by asbestos because the water can move the fibers away the natural occurring asbestos and transport the fibers very long place. When you approach to study asbestos minerals, you must remember that you can find different minerals with fibrous morphology, and we can find polymorphs. In this case, we have amphibous asbestos, tremolite and actinolite, but other amphibols, even with fibrous morphology, don't meet with asbestos definition by chemical point of view. This is a view of different fibers, the identification of the asbestos and non-asbestos, but in this slide we can see that SEM or XRPD don't allow to unequivocal identification of asbestos in specific case a serpentine polymorph, because these techniques don't allow to discriminate between chrysotile or fibrous antigorite, for example. And to overcome this problem, I suggest to study asbestos minerals using multi-analytical approach for obtaining reliable data. For example, to overcome the problem of polymorph of serpentine, I suggest to use a thermoanalysis. In fact, with thermoanalysis, we can get a temperature breakdown of different polymorph, well as the other temperature breakdown of the amphibole asbestos, that is a higher temperature in respect to chrysotile, lizardite, or antigorite. And the other techniques to solve the polymorph of the serpentine is TM, but in this case we have a point analysis point, while the thermoanalysis is a bulk technique.
Okay, so thank you very much. So now we know that asbestos is very dangerous and is still extracted by some countries, is still in some infrastructures, and they have to be dismantled now. And so we want to propose some very simple measures. We know that those measures will work because they have been applied for other risks or hazards. Prevention can save lives, and it can be implemented by different ways. And here we have some very basic but very important measures, like, for example, to establish different protocols or communication measures and education. Regarding the I'm sorry. Regarding the basic measures, they are focused on occupational safety protocols and non-occupational safety protocols. The first one is focused on wearing hygienic face masks or any other kind of mask, because we know that they work. They filter the fibrous minerals that they are expelled during the process of works, like extraction of rocks or cleaning with laser ablation for restoration purposes. Regarding the non-occupational safety protocols are related to women mainly, because workers extracting serpentinides or working with asbestos would take their clothes home to be washed, and they were washed by their wives. So those women would be asbestos contaminated. And the protocol is very simple. The workers just have to leave the clothes in the working place. This is an experiment we made just to demonstrate that just wearing masks was useful and could save lives. Here we developed an artifact, ad hoc. This is the laser, but we developed this box where we put the serpentinite that was going to be cleaned or laser by this technique with some masks. This is the serpentinite after applying the ablation, and these are the masks where we see a lot of fibers. So this works. The masks, they stop the powder and the fibers. To check it out, we had a look under the microscope. This is a petrographic microscope where we saw the clean filters, the EPA filter and a normal face mask. And after the experiment, we see that the filters have stopped many, many fibers. So this is very interesting to show the workers that do not want to wear masks because they are uncomfortable. We have recently published a paper, it's open access, where you can see all the protocol. So because if we go to a quarry and we go to some other working place, we see the workers are not wearing masks, we should use communication to tell them that all these prevention measures are saving masks. So this is the communication measures, and the countries publish many different guides so workers know how to proceed to avoid getting sick. We also suggested like a workflow of protocols that are published in this paper I was telling you about. Sorry, I wasn't meaning to show you this. And the final prevention measure is, of course, education. We think that including medical geology subjects in the study plans, at least at the master level, would be very important. We don't think that our earth sciences courses have specific matters on medical geology, at least of all on asbestos. So we have started to implement this prevention measure by starting to talk about asbestos as a natural but also anthropic hazard. The examples are one master course in the University of Salamanca, where we have implemented a subject called Social Impact, Sustainability and Risk Management Policies, where we talk about different hazards, including asbestos. And this year, a student has defended a master's thesis titled Asbestos Uncovered, Effective Disclosure Strategies to Raise Awareness and Prevent Workplace Diseases. We have also helped in developing a new master course at the University of Unipungwe in Mozambique, in Africa, in the frame of Erasmus Plus Geodes. The master is given in Portuguese, but we think we are going to be collaborating from the European partners and give some lessons also in other languages. And to finalize, this is Thomas Feininger. He was a professor at Laval University in Quebec, in Canada, and he was my tutor during one stay I made in Laval. He taught me a lot about asbestos, and he was a great disseminator. He worked a lot in outreach, and here you see wearing his asbestos vest, who he would be using every time he was giving a talk. He wrote a very short but very interesting paper in this Elements magazine, and he told me communication of science is very important, but has to be done by professionals to avoid fake news, to avoid alarmism, and always trying to reach the different stakeholders, including other scientists. So this is what we wanted to talk to you about today. And I hope we have time to have some comments or questions, but just in case, here I'm leaving our emails in case you want to contact us to comment or to ask any questions or give your advice afterwards. Thank you very much.
Thanks.
Oh, thank you very much for this interesting and comprehensive presentation of that will help us all to know a little bit about asbestos. We are very grateful to you, and well, I would like to ask our colleagues applause for you.
thank you very much.
Thank you.
If anyone wants to make a question, please go ahead.
Well, thank you so much, Dr. Lola and Andrea, for your presentation. It's a very, really relevant research for India. And thank you so much for accepting our invitation. Thank you so much.
Thanks to you for organizing this session.
Thanks
Thank you.
for involving me in this webinar.
Thank you. Xiao Sheng.
How are you?
Hi.
Thank you, Laura and Andrea. Hi, Elena and Maria.
Hi.
And well,